What if I told you that medieval peasants survived brutal winters, not with firewood or fur coats, but with composted floors, underground fridges, and cows as central heating? Their survival methods were so smart, modern scientists are still trying to catch up. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at winter or your thermostat the same way again. Let's start with their homes, because if you think medieval peasants lived in drafty wooden shacks held together by hope and hate, think again. These people were the original passive home architects. Most peasant homes were dug 2 to 3 feet into the earth. Why? Because even back then, they knew the ground stayed warmer than the air above. It's basically like building your house in a kiddie pool filled with geothermal magic. But it wasn't just about digging holes and calling it architecture. These houses were sealed tighter than a medieval tax ledger. Tiny windows, low ceilings, thick walls, all designed to trap heat like it owed them rent. And those walls? Made with wattle and daub. Sounds cute, right? Like a nursery rhyme. But it's actually just twigs and poop. Yep, you heard me. Medieval peasants literally insulated their homes with dung. And honestly, it worked. Modern studies show it performed on par with fiberglass. So next time your house feels chilly, just remember you've got insulation. They had cows and creativity. At the center of it all was the hearth. Not just for cooking, it was the medieval microwave, radiator, smoke machine, and gossip center all rolled into one. Studies of 1300s peasant homes show these central hearths kept interior temps at a toasty 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, even when it was freezing outside. Not bad for a house made of sticks and poop. And the smoke? That wasn't just a fire hazard, it was a feature. It insulated the ceiling, repelled insects, and extended the life of the roof. Sure, everyone probably walked around with eyes redder than a knight's tabard. But hey, no termites. These houses were so smartly designed that modern architects have studied them to improve sustainable building. Isn't kidding when we say these folks were climate resilience pioneers. And this was just the beginning. Their homes were warm, but what about food? How did they keep things from freezing or rotting without a fridge? In part 2, we're going underground, and it's colder, smellier, and smarter than you think. If the medieval home was the body, then the hearth was the beating heart, and this baby did everything. You see, today we have central heating, space heaters, smart thermostats. Medieval peasants had fire, just fire. But oh, did they maximize that flame? The hearth wasn't just for keeping warm. Cooked meals, dried clothes, lit the room, sterilized water, smoked meats, and occasionally, yes, burned the house down. A true all-in-one unit. And where did they put it? Dead center. Because heat radiates outwards. It's basic physics. Or as they called it, the warm stuff goes out from the hot bit. Archaeological digs show that in homes around 1300, these hearths could maintain indoor temps of 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, even when it was snowing sideways outside. For peasants, that was practically a sauna. Now, you'd think all that smoke just made the place miserable. And yes, there were tears. But the smoke had a job to do. It created a layer of warm air near the ceiling, deterred insects, and, here's the kicker, actually preserved the thatched roof from rot and decay. Modern thatch lasts 15 to 20 years. Medieval smoky thatch? 30 plus years. Baby. The entire household revolved around the fire. Literally. People slept, worked, and ate as close to it as possible. Pets included. It was the medieval version of Netflix and chill, except the entertainment was firelight shadows and the occasional drunk uncle with a lute. Low ceilings, draft blockers, thick walls, it all funneled that heat where it needed to go. They were doing heat management centuries before smart homes. They used every burnable scrap, wood, peat, dried dung. Nothing was wasted. You had one job, keep the fire alive. Letting it go out, that's like deleting your heat source and cooking app in one click. Oh, and the really clever ones? They added smoke shelves, simple wooden ledges that trapped heat near the ceiling longer and slowed down smoke escape. These weren't crude cavemen fumbling with fire. These were engineering minds in sheepskin cloaks, building thermal systems that modern scientists still marvel at. Coming up next, you've seen the fire, but what happens when the stew pot's empty and winter's only just begun? In part 3, we open the coolest part of the medieval home, the underground fridge. You probably think medieval peasants just hibernated all winter like bears in burlap. But no, these people ran on tighter schedules than a Swiss train. Their winter days were choreographed down to the minute and the frostbite. First off, medieval folks didn't sleep like us. They had first sleep and second sleep, with a wakeful period in between, somewhere around midnight. They used this time for light tasks, reflection, or even visiting neighbors. Yup, midnight social hour was a thing. Take that, insomniacs. Between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., high sun, was prime productivity time. This was when the village moved like clockwork. Manor records from 1267 show people were actually fined for missing these golden hours. Miss your shift? Pay in chickens or firewood. Villages even had a rotating frost watch. Families took turns maintaining fires, checking on the sick, and monitoring temperatures through the night. They used clay pots filled with water to gauge the frost level. Freeze too fast? Time to alert the village. Forget brunch. Medieval people ate with purpose. Main meal? Around 11 a.m., when the communal ovens were hottest. One baker's log from 1298 showed that 100 loaves could warm an entire hall by 3 degrees Celsius. Who needs radiators when bread can heat your house? After 2 p.m., work moved indoors, not because peasants were lazy, but because cold could kill. They had cold watchers using clay pots and even animal behavior to know when to stop outdoor work. They also held twilight councils, village meetings in the biggest house, not just to talk, but to share body heat. Think of it as a medieval board meeting meets group hug. At night, the last family to bank their hearth fire had to walk house to house, checking if others had done the same. Mess it up, and lose half your winter firewood. Brutal. They even choreographed bed positions, youngest and oldest in the center, strongest by the edges. Medieval spooning wasn't romantic. It was strategic. Every part of the winter day was a lesson in thermal logic, communal care, and military-grade scheduling. These people didn't have clocks, but they ran like a factory powered by firewood and teamwork. Ever wonder how they kept vegetables fresh for 6 months without a fridge? It's time to uncover the medieval underground food system that would make Gordon Ramsay weep with awe. Think your tiny twin bed is bad? Try fitting your whole family on a wooden plank with straw, and somehow, it's the warmest spot in the house. Peasants didn't sleep alone, or in shifts, or with privacy. They spooned, and not just for fun. It was thermodynamic warfare against winter. They arranged themselves by heat needs, elderly and infants in the middle, strongest on the outside. It wasn't romance, it was strategic body heat placement. These weren't just hay piles on the ground. Beds were raised exactly 18 inches off the floor, high enough to escape cold air pooling near the ground, but low enough to soak up heat from animals below. Some families even built beds directly above cow pens, yes, cow-powered heating. No moving needed. And they didn't lie flat either. They slept slightly reclined, like sitting in a big comfy chair. It helped them breathe better and trap heat more efficiently. Modern thermal analysis shows this position reduced cold exposure by 30%. Forget memory foam, medieval peasants were ergonomic geniuses. Their bedding was a feat of insulation engineering. Base layer, straw, middle wool, top. Every piece of cloth the family owned. Some even stuffed moss between layers for warmth. And yes, it worked. They didn't wash winter bedding. Why? Because unwashed wool retains natural lanolin, making it water-resistant and warmer. Gross? Sure. Effective? Absolutely. Believe it or not, some villages had official sleep inspectors. If your family didn't sleep close enough, bam, you'd be fined for wasting heat with your body spacing. One unlucky guy in 1289 lost half his firewood for sleeping too far from his uncle. Medieval parenting. Now with thermal discipline. It didn't stop when you fell asleep. Families rotated positions at night as people got up to check fires, tend animals, or, yes, answer nature's call. They also rotated the fire-checking chore. Last person up made sure every hearth was banked safely. Screw it up? Forfeit your firewood. Again. Turns out they were right. Shared sleeping could raise local temps by 8 degrees Celsius. Sloped beds, layered straw, shared blankets, these weren't guesses. They were field-tested survival hacks, passed down like sacred recipes. So yes, medieval sleep looked cramped, itchy, and smoky, but it was calculated warmth. Up next in Part 5, the underground refrigerators of the Middle Ages. How peasants kept veggies crisp while the world froze around them. You've heard of heated floors, but how about heated livestock? That's right, medieval peasants literally slept above cows to survive winter. Welcome to the original cow radiator system. Because animals, like humans, radiate heat. A full-grown cow can raise the surrounding temperature by 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. That may not sound like much, until you're trying not to die from frostbite. So instead of separate barns, many medieval homes welcomed their animals indoors for the winter. Talk about open-concept living. They didn't just toss animals in willy-nilly. Medieval households had animal zoning, cows near the beds, pigs near food stores, and chickens anywhere they could flap in heat. Historical records even ranked animals by heat output. Cows were worth 4 sheep. Pigs? Only half a cow. Chickens? Basically hot potatoes with wings. The animal's breath and body heat created a warm, humid layer of air that helped insulate the house. Today, we call that the greenhouse effect. Back then, they just called it smart. Studies of preserved medieval homes show that this system helped prevent freezing and mold. A win-win powered by moo. Some homes were designed specifically with animals in mind. Raised sleeping platforms, floor vents for airflow, and even angled stalls to direct warm breath toward humans. One archaeological site even found a house with airflow channels from the cow's nose to the bed area. That's right, they engineered bovine-powered convection heating. You might be thinking, okay, but didn't it reek? Yes, but medieval people had that covered too. They used layers of straw, ash, and even compost to trap waste and produce heat while breaking down. It was basically the medieval version of heated bathroom tiles, with extra moo. Manor records from 1295 actually include animal heat quotas, the minimum number of animals needed to heat a home based on family size. 2 cows for a family of 5. 3 pigs if you're desperate. They even had animal heat inspectors. If your cow didn't meet weight standards, penalty. 1 chicken, payable to the community firewood pile. Some villages used rotating livestock hosting. Families would take turns sheltering the biggest animals to share the heat. And yes, there were actual arguments over who got to keep the warmest bowl. Modern airflow studies show these arrangements kept homes above freezing for up to 12 hours, even when it was minus 10 degrees Celsius outside. Not bad for people using cows instead of boilers. So the next time you complain about a cold house, just remember, a medieval peasant would have just brought in the family pig. Coming up in Part 6. How they built underground fridges without a single watt of electricity, and why their food stayed fresh longer than ours. Forget North Face. Forget Gore-Tex. Medieval peasants had 5 layers of wool, animal fat rubbed into their coats, and moss stuffed down their tunics. And guess what? It worked. Wool was the king of winter wear, but they didn't just wear one wool layer. No, these frost warriors wore up to 5 layers, each with a specific job, from wicking moisture to blocking wind. The trick? They never washed their winter clothes. Why? Because washing removed the natural lanolin in wool, the very thing that made it water-resistant. Medieval insulation wasn't high-tech, but it was brilliant. Peasants stuffed moss, straw, and even dried leaves between clothing layers. It was like walking around in a compost pile, but warm. Records show they used up to 12 types of moss, selected for different traits. Some were antimicrobial, others fantastic insulators. Yes, they had professional moss collectors. Next, they rubbed their outer layers with animal fat, sheep, deer, even bear if they were lucky. This turned their cloaks into makeshift raincoats. And if that wasn't enough, they mixed in tree sap, pine or birch, to strengthen the waterproofing. Modern chemists recreated this and found it's nearly as effective as today's waxed canvas. Linen-based layers were ideal but expensive, so most peasants wove nettle fibers into their inner wool to wick sweat. Yes, stinging nettles. It was itchy as hell, but it kept them dry. Recent textile analysis found that this itchy blend wicked moisture almost as well as modern synthetics. Take that, Under Armour. Those funny-looking hoods? Not just for style. They were made of layered wool panels that could rotate to block wind from any direction. And the pointy shoes? They weren't just fashion fails, they reduced surface contact with snow, minimizing heat loss from feet. They had entire wardrobes for winter, but with science behind the switch. They waited for signs. Wilting blackberries? Migrating geese? Or the first frost? That's when the winter shift began. Medieval homes even had herb-scented clothing chests. These herbs, lavender, rosemary, thyme, fought off moths and bacteria. Yes, they were antibacterial before bacteria was even a word. Making these clothes was community work. Villages held spinning bees, basically medieval sewing circles with 20 to 30 people generating both wool clothes and body heat. One manor record shows a spinning bee saved enough firewood to last 3 extra weeks. Now that's sustainable fashion. So, the next time you're wrapped in your polyester coat, just remember, medieval peasants stayed just as warm, using moss, grease, and sheer woolly willpower. In Part 7, we'll show you how they preserved food through winter without refrigerators, and why some of their cold storage tricks outperform ours today. You think your mini fridge is smart? Medieval peasants had underground food bunkers that kept turnips fresh for months. And no, they didn't just bury stuff and pray. It was borderline science fiction with root vegetables. Meet the OG refrigerator, the underground storage pit. These weren't just holes, they were temperature-regulated food chambers. Most villages had hundreds. One site in Yorkshire revealed over 200 storage pits for 50 families. That's 4 medieval fridges per household. Take that, urban studio apartments. They even used vegetables as temperature indicators. If carrots showed frost damage, add insulation. If they sprouted, increase airflow. That's medieval smart tech with roots. One 13th century manuscript lists 20+ veggies by frost sensitivity, like an Excel sheet for farmers without Excel. Hay wasn't just for cows. Peasants wrapped storage chambers in layers of hay, creating what scientists now call thermal gradient zones. Add snow on top and boom, 35 degrees Fahrenheit storage that lasted till May. Medieval villagers were running natural snow-powered refrigerators while we're out here paying energy bills. By the 1200s, pits had drainage channels, ventilation shafts, and humidity control. Some had multiple rooms. It's like the wine cellar you dream of, except full of turnips. One preserved site even maintained 85 to 95% humidity, ideal for long-term vegetable freshness. Modern recreations show these chambers kept veggies usable for months. They didn't just store food, they rotated it like clockwork. Manure records show detailed instructions for when to move vegetables between pits depending on outside temperatures. And to check for spoilage, they had the fool's test. One unlucky soul had to taste food every few days. If he lived, everyone else could eat. For meat and dairy, they leaned on salt, smoke, and fermentation. Salted pork could last all winter. Cheese? Aged in caves for months. Fermentation wasn't trendy, it was survival. Medieval villagers made beer thick as stew, sauerkraut bursting with probiotics, and even wine from roots. Gordon Ramsay might faint, but the science checks out. Their winter beer was so calorie-dense. 1 pint equaled 400 calories. That's a cheeseburger in a mug. And it kept villagers alive when solid food ran low. Some communities even had beer rotations in their preservation schedule, with stronger brews for the deepest cold spells. So before you complain about your fridge's crisper drawer, remember, medieval peasants preserved food for 6 months without electricity, plastic, or preservatives, and even invented food-safe humidity control. In Part 8, we'll see how their cooking turned preserved roots and grains into meals so hearty, Olympic athletes today would be jealous. You think your winter diet is rough? Medieval peasants were downing more calories than a modern Olympian, just to keep their toes from freezing off. Forget keto, paleo, or whatever Gwyneth Paltrow's eating. Medieval winter diets were built around one thing: heat. And that meant calories. Lots of them. Historical records from the 1300s recommend up to 5,000 calories a day during the coldest months. That's 2 Big Macs for breakfast. The MVP of medieval cuisine? Pottage. A thick, never-ending stew that simmered day and night. You didn't finish it, you just kept adding to it. Some pots ran for up to 3 weeks. Modern food inspectors would faint, but the constant simmering, it actually kept bacteria at bay. These folks invented layered nutrition centuries before my plate. Root veggies on the bottom for complex carbs, legumes in the middle for protein, and grains on top for quick energy. A literal food pyramid in a pot. Nothing says, I want to live like drinking sour cabbage juice. Fermented foods weren't just flavor, they were gut survival tactics. Lab analysis of recreated medieval sauerkraut, ale, and preserved root veg shows 10x more probiotic strains than most modern products. Medieval winter bread wasn't your fluffy white loaf. It was dark, dense, fermented, and tough enough to dent a helmet. But it was also packed with fiber, B vitamins, and complex carbs. One loaf had more fiber than a modern person eats in 3 days. Winter ale was nearly as thick as porridge and packed with calories. 1 pint equals a cheeseburger, and it helped them stay hydrated too, since boiling killed most bacteria. Meal times weren't random. Villages ate the biggest meal at dawn, just before work. Another at midday, a light bite before bed. It was chrononutrition before anyone had watches. Modern research shows their schedule aligned closely with metabolic efficiency and thermoregulation. Basically, they ate with the sun and it worked. Some recipes were tweaked for frost season. A 1278 porridge recipe advised cooking oats until soft as baby teeth to increase calorie absorption. That's gross, but it's also science. Modern testing shows longer cooking broke down starches for 30% more bioavailable energy. Fat was life. Winter recipes nearly doubled the use of animal fat. Medical texts even advised thrice the fat when frost bites twice. Some families stockpiled fat like treasure. It was used in stews, fried bread, candles, and rubbed on walls for insulation. Medieval lard, the WD-40 of its time. So the next time you skip breakfast, remember, a medieval peasant ate 5,000 calories and still had time to build a barn, chop wood, and ferment a cabbage. In Part 9, we dive into how they slept and why sleeping in spoon formation was the key to survival. Before social safety nets, before smart thermostats, before group chats, there was the medieval village. And let me tell you, these folks turned winter survival into a full-blown community operation worthy of a logistics PhD. First up, meet the frost wardens. Yes, that was an actual job. These were the people who started prepping in the middle of summer for winter. Because when it's minus 10 degrees Celsius and your firewood's wet, you're not innovating, you're freezing. They assigned gathering teams, track supply tallies, and organized frost watch shifts, which were basically the medieval version of night patrol, except your enemy was death by hypothermia. Villages created entire rotational workforces. Families were grouped into woodcutters, stackers, haulers. Roles rotated weekly so no one got stuck dragging logs in a blizzard 3 weeks in a row. Modern labor economists studying these records found the system more balanced than some corporate shift schedules today. And they tracked performance using points. No, seriously, families earned winter points for firewood collection, trail clearing, and frost duty. Fall behind? You got the coldest corner of the communal hall. One manor record from 1293 even shows a literal notchstick used to tally duties. Imagine a medieval Excel sheet carved in wood. These weren't just big huts, they were engineering feats. Positioned to block wind for the whole village, double-doored for airlock insulation, and often equipped with tiered seating to separate heat levels. Tests on reconstructed halls showed they could retain up to 45% more heat than a single home structure. Think of it as the medieval version of co-working spaces, except warmer and with more soup. Teams patrolled at night, checked on elders, stoked communal fires, and, get this, used clay pots of water placed at various heights to measure how fast things were freezing. That's right, peasant thermometers. If freezing happened too fast, sound the horn. Everyone indoors. Miss your frost watch duty? That's 1 chicken or 3 dozen eggs is fine. That's not a metaphor. Villagers didn't just hope to stay warm. They scheduled heat-sharing gatherings. Think of it as bring your body heat parties. Historical records show they calculated exactly how many people were needed in the communal hall to reach thermal comfort. Some villages rotated hosting duties, essentially assigning families to heat each other's homes. Medieval warmth sharing was real. Churches played their part too. Many had special warming rooms, kale factories, dedicated to infants, elders, and the sick. These were the original heated shelters. One church record lists specific firewood rations and warmth watchers who maintained ideal conditions. They were low-key early HVAC techs, just with robes and candles. Villages didn't forget the vulnerable. They planned ahead for widows, the ill, and new parents. One record even shows a pre-winter risk audit of households, assigning helpers accordingly. You can call it socialism or just smart survival. Turns out, when the temperature drops, empathy is a survival trait. Modern thermodynamic tests on reconstructed villages found that these communal strategies allowed temperatures to stay above freezing for 18 hours without fresh firewood, just using people and planning. So the next time your power goes out and your Wi-Fi drops, just remember, medieval peasants were coordinating heat-sharing parties, food patrols, and climate-aware architectural strategies, all while wearing moss-filled pants. So you've got a warm medieval hut, cows as space heaters, and preserved veggies packed in hay. Now the question is, how do you turn that frozen root pile into something edible without dying? Welcome to the medieval kitchen where survival met science and dinner simmered for weeks. Everything revolved around the central hearth. This wasn't just a fireplace, it was the stove, oven, food sanitizer, family gathering place, and rumor mill all in one. It burned constantly, And the most iconic dish to ever come from it? The mighty pottage. Think of it as a medieval slow cooker that never got turned off. Every day, someone would toss in whatever they had: turnips, beans, oats, salted meat, yesterday's stew, maybe even this morning's bread crusts. This thing brewed for weeks. Literally. Food historians found residues in ancient cooking pots that showed layers of meals stacked over time like a culinary sediment core. One French manor pot showed 17 different additions across 22 days. Gordon Ramsay would have a heart attack, but microbiologists say the constant simmer killed bacteria and preserved nutrition. Sorry, Gordon, this sludge was genius. You think calorie tracking is modern? Think again. Manor records from 1286 outline pottage layering like a food pyramid. Root veg at the bottom for long-term energy. Beans for protein, grains on top for quick carbs. Turns out their pot-fed macros were more balanced than most fast food meals today. Before kombucha influencers, medieval peasants were fermenting everything. Grains into beer, fruit into mead, cabbage into sauerkraut. They didn't know the word probiotic, but they were swimming in it. A 1292 record from York even details a winter beer so thick it had 400 calories per pint. Basically medieval protein shake, but boozy. Their bread? Not your fluffy, Instagram-friendly sourdough. We're talking dense, dark, slightly fermented bricks that doubled as both food and improvised weapons. But that terrible bread was accidentally brilliant. Their bad milling left all the bran and germ intact, resulting in loaves with more fiber than most people eat in 3 days. One loaf equals digestive health, and maybe a broken tooth. They even had recipes for nutrient optimization. A porridge from 1278 said to cook grains until soft as a child's teeth. Gross visual, yes, but the extended simmer made calories more bioavailable. These weren't flavor-forward dishes, but they were smart. Archaeologists ran tests showing these methods outperformed modern diets in terms of nutrient density per calorie. Boom! They didn't just eat well, they timed it well. Biggest meal? At dawn to generate heat for the day. Midday backup fuel. Evening. Light soup, so you didn't wake up cold and hungry. Turns out this peasant routine aligns with modern chrononutrition science, eating with your circadian rhythm. These people would have owned the wellness podcast scene. Kinda? With 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day during winter, they weren't just surviving, they were fueling like athletes. And they did it with no fridge, no blender, no Uber Eats, just fire, fermentation, and a family-sized pottage pot passed down for generations. Their meals may not have made Michelin, but they made it through medieval winters. And in the next chapter, we'll go even deeper into the science of sleeping together to stay alive. Get ready for body heat logistics, medieval spooning, and official sleep inspectors, yes, really. While modern churches might offer spiritual warmth, medieval churches had to provide literal warmth too. Especially when the wind howled, the frost bit, and little Timmy's nose was turning blue. Medieval communities didn't just see churches as places to confess their sins. They were also community heat hubs, with a little divine bonus on the side. In fact, many larger churches featured special rooms called kale factories, yep, literal heat rooms, built specifically to keep people from freezing during Mass. Records from 13th century monastic texts describe kale factories as the designated warm spots for infants, the elderly, and anyone who sneezed too hard. And let's be honest, when a sneeze could be a death sentence in medieval Europe, that was pretty smart thinking. The kale factory wasn't just a warm room. It was strategically built with thick stone walls, limited windows, and carefully placed hearths that distributed heat evenly. Historians estimate that during deep winter, these rooms could maintain up to 8 degrees Celsius warmer than the outside temperature, just from body heat and clever design. And because warmth was social, medieval villagers got creative. They held twilight councils, village meetings timed with the setting sun, not for drama, but because 30 people in one room could raise the temperature by 5 degrees Celsius. That's not a meeting, that's a medieval sauna strategy. These communal spaces weren't free-for-alls though. There were strict schedules. One village even required families to rotate who brought the firewood, who watched the embers, and who checked for heat hoarders. Yes, that was a real job. You could literally be fined for hogging the warmest corner. The churches themselves were designed with winter in mind. Stone for insulation, high ceilings to trap smoke, and windows positioned to catch maximum sunlight even on the shortest days of the year. Some even had underfloor fire pits that acted like primitive radiant heating. That's right, medieval underfloor heating, centuries before it became a Pinterest trend. And if you thought modern communities had the monopoly on clever winter programming, think again. Churches organized warmth rosters, where families would take turns bringing extra fuel to keep the church fires burning during the coldest nights. No donation basket needed, your offering was logs. So while we might crank up the thermostat today and binge watch our way through a snowstorm, medieval folks gathered together in sacred warmth, proving that sometimes the best heating system is community and a roaring fire under a vaulted ceiling. Let's get one thing straight. Medieval peasants weren't just surviving the winter, they were engineering their way through it. And while your modern self might rely on central heating and emergency hot cocoa, these villagers had something better. Regional ingenuity backed by centuries of frozen trial and error. One village in northern France came up with a genius idea. After community baking days, they'd take the still hot oven stones, wrap them in wool, and deliver them to elderly homes. It was Uber Eats meets Hot Pocket, medieval edition. The heat would last for hours, and in well-insulated cottages, it could even replace a fire for the night. These rocks weren't just warm, they were strategically rotated, tracked by duty rosters written on, get this, sheep scapulas. Think heated hallways are modern? Nope. One village in the Alps dug shallow tunnels connecting key buildings, like the church, food store, and communal hall. These passageways were insulated with straw bales and hay, creating underground snowproof routes. They weren't just warm, they were safe. You could walk the whole village without ever stepping into the wind. It's like a medieval version of a mall, if the mall was made of dirt and survival. Some villagers wrapped their entire houses in layers of hay. Not just for the animals, for the structure itself. They created what modern scientists now call thermal buffer zones, which stabilized interior temperatures by up to 6 degrees Celsius. Scientists who replicated this method in modern conditions found it nearly as effective as modern wall insulation, except cheaper, renewable, and smells like a barn. In a region where glass was rare and cold was cruel, one community used stiffened cloth dipped in beeswax as window panes. They were translucent, wind-resistant, and surprisingly good at keeping in heat while still letting in sunlight. And bonus, beeswax has antimicrobial properties which probably helped with indoor air quality. Take that, HEPA filters. In extremely cold seasons, villagers didn't just sleep close. They rotated who slept in the warmest spots. Middle spots in bed, reserved for the babies and elderly. Outer edges, young adults. Everyone took turns, tracked by community sleeping charts. It wasn't just snuggling, it was survival math. A handful of clever communities set up a frost watch alert system using horns or bells. When the temperature dropped suddenly, watchers would sound the alarm, signaling villagers to shut vents, reinforce doors, or move livestock closer. Court records even show that ignoring the frost horn could result in fines, or worse, getting stuck with firewood duty for a week. These weren't random acts of desperation. They were part of a deeply collaborative survival system, built on trust, adaptation, and a whole lot of cleverness. We think we're advanced with our Wi-Fi thermostats, but these medieval minds, they turned hay, bone, fire, and teamwork into the ultimate survival tech. We like to think we've outsmarted winter. Central heating, double-glazed windows, smart thermostats, and grocery delivery at the tap of a screen. But what if the people who really beat the cold weren't modern at all? The legacy of medieval winter survival isn't just about quaint cottages or poop-insulated walls, though those are impressive. It's about a mindset: community over convenience, resilience over luxury, and wisdom that was earned, not bought. Because these people didn't just adapt to their environment, they shaped their lives around it. Every wall, every meal, every moment of sleep was a calculated decision based on hundreds of years of collective learning. And strangely enough, they were right about a lot of things. They invented passive heating before architects had a word for it. They practiced sleep science before it had a name. They created a zero-waste food system with near-perfect nutrition. And they built communities where survival meant shared effort, not solo struggle. In the face of cold, they didn't isolate. They gathered. In the face of scarcity, they planned. In the face of danger, they shared the warmth. Today, as we face colder winters, energy crises, and the rising costs of staying warm, maybe it's time we looked backward to move forward. Because sometimes the key to surviving the future lies in the ashes of the past.